So, um, this is the same process for the kaftan we did in the class. So, I have my miniature pattern. This is my front. This is my front pattern. This is my sleeve, complete sleeve pattern, which I cut out, adding my sewing allowance, as you can see, and I notched this center to help me align the shoulder line to the sleeve. Then I cut off this part for my cuff. That's where I'm sewing the placket to. So that's that for the sleeve. So this is my front part and this is the back part of the sleeve. So I put this aside. As for the placket for this place, I cut this out, the short one and the long one. So the short one, I used 4 cm. So I used 4 cm as the width, total width. So this 4 cm has included my sewing allowance. So this 4 cm has included my sewing allowance. So I cut one short. This one that is short is 10 cm. As you can see, is a little bit longer than my placket length. So, and remember, I cut it on fold. So if I open it on fold, it's going to give me 8 cm. So that's that. And as for this one has to be longer than this because this is going to be placed on this. So that's that for the sleeve. Then I cut out my sleeve cuff. I already have pattern for the cuff, which we did in class. So just all you need to do is just add the sewing process all around, and as well cut on fold. Can you see? So your cuff, make sure you iron stay inside. Okay. Or you iron the collar stay on one side of the cuff, leaving your sewing allowance out. So that's that for this. I'm putting this aside. Then coming to my front and my side. So I'm going to do facing for my front because I want a decorative facing. I want my facing to be visible on the right face of my kaftan. So I just did this design. So I wanted this design for my front. So I had to sketch out this design on my pattern. So I'm cutting this part. So I'm cutting this part out to cut the yoke. But remember that you must first of all have your full bodies before you cut out your design on the pattern. So that's that for the front, and I have my sewing allowance and the hemming allowance. So as for the back, my back yoke, I did the V yoke. So all I did was measure the depth of my yoke and I connected it up to this part. So I have my slanted line. By the time I cut it out, it will give me the V shape. And as well at the back, I want a placket at the back, like a box split. So that's why I left this allowance. So at the end of the day, I'm going to stitch all the way from here straight down, iron my placket out before I sew my yoke on it. So I'm going to do a patched yoke. So that's that, and I left my sewing allowance and everything. So let's get back to the sewing. So now I have cut out my yoke, like the front yoke, which I'm using to make the design, and the back yoke. So make sure you always iron stay on anything that has to do with facing or yoke. Okay, so I'm starting with the sleeve. So I have the short placket and the long placket. So I pinned the short placket to one side and pinned the long placket to one side. But when I'm stitching, I'm going to stitch on this allowance, and you can see the short placket. I have to fold it in because I needed to knit in the edge. I cannot just leave the raw edge like that, so that was why I folded it. But if you have a serger, you can just serge the edge and leave it like that. So I'm stitching from here all the way to that point, and I'm stitching the long placket all the way to that point as well. So that point is where the opening stops, as you can see, so that I can turn it to the right face. So now this placement of the two plackets is on the wrong side of my calico. As you can see, the pencil, this pencil indicates that this is the wrong side of my sleeve. So that's that. You pin it this way, then do your sewing. I do the sewing and stop there. So I'm done with the sewing now. So all I need to do is push this to the right face like that. And for me to be able to push this one to the right face, I need to stitch, I need to cut this, just the half-inch allowance, so that you can turn it inside. So what I did now was I've turned my plackets to the front, you can see. So I piped my placket in between the line, and I turned it to the right face, so I pinned it down. Then as for the long one, I did the same thing and I pinned it down. And remember, I told you to notch, so you are notching this so that you be able to, but if you are notching, don't over notch exactly the sewing allowance. Don't over notch it. Yes, like that notch, so that you can be able to do this one too. So I've already done it, and you can see it on the right face. So all you need to do now is to set this properly so that the two stays on each other. Then after setting it, you fold this part to your preference. So when you are stitching, you stitch all the way from this side, you stitch all the way to this point and come sew across, so that you can hold the placket underneath. So you sew across, come this way, then sew across this and go to this point. So that's that for the sleeve placket. Okay, so right now I'm done sewing my placket down, as you can see, and I did the crossing, I did the design. So you can do design of your choice, and you can as well leave it as the box thing. So you can see my placket is all set. So the next thing to do is to do my bodies. So since we are done with the sleeve placket, then I come over to my back bodies. So I'm sewing this out on the right face. So this, my pencil is on the right face of the fabric because my pleat is going to be visible on the right face of my fabric. So this is the back. I'm sewing out my pleat. So right now I'm done with the sewing of the pleat. So what I have to do now is to take it to my ironing board and open it all out like this, so that I can steam press it. So after steam pressing it, then I'm going to place my yoke. Like I'll use my yoke, back yoke, to turn the neck and bring it to the right face, so that I can do the V. So you can see my front now, that this is my front yoke, that's the design I want to be at the front. So I've already used iron to turn in the allowance, and I used iron to form a crease line as well, and you can see the same crease line on the main front, so that by the time I'm placing this on this, it will be on a straight line. And the reason why I'm doing this is because of the slit, because I'm still going to cut the center front. So now I have my back facing, my back yoke as well. You know, I told you I'll be doing the patch thing, the yoke. So this is the right face of my back, and this is the right face of my yoke. So how do I use this facing to turn the neck? So I'm going to flip my back fabric, the back, to the wrong side, and I'm going to place the right side of my yoke to the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm going to pin it that way, like pin the neck like that. So I'm stitching the neck with my sewing allowance. Snipe the curve, make sure you don't cut your seam line. So snipe the curve and turn this to the right face so that I can stitch my yoke on the right face. So I've already turned my neck to the right face, and you can see the way I set it on. So that is my yoke. You can see the way it's set on this. So I'm going to stitch this like that, following the shape of the yoke like that. So now I'm done sewing, as you can see, neatly sewn. So that's that for that. Now let me move to the front. So as for the front, this is my front pattern. I will use the same method I used with the back yoke. I will use the same method. So what I have to do is turn, this is the right face of my fabric, so I'm turning it to the wrong side. This is the wrong side, and I'm placing the right side of my yoke. I'm setting it like that. So now this is what I'm going to do here. I will first of all stitch the neck like that. Then this middle crease line, I'm going to measure the amount of opening that I want here. So once you mark the length of the opening that you are doing, then you stitch. So right now I've sewn the neck, then because I want the slit at the front, you can see the small V. So your V too has to be like that for you to have a perfect slit. So that's that. So I'm cutting this at the middle, stopping at this point, then snipe the neck and turn it to the right face. So I've ironed out the front now. I've turned it to the right face, as you can see. So what I need to do now is to place the front, is to insert this shoulder between my front shoulder and the facing like that. So I'm going to put it in between like this. So this is what I'm doing. You place the right face of your back to the right face of the front, setting the shoulder. After you make sure the shoulder is set, then you pick one of the shoulder for the front. Make sure you align it very well so that you can use the other side to okay. So now to turn it, so pick one of the front, yes, so align it with the yes, pin it well. Start your pinning from the neck point, is the contact. Align your neck point like that. Yes. Okay. So you bring that on it exactly. So you set that very well so that you can sew on the allowance. Good. So you do the same thing for the other side of the shoulder.